Good morning. Hi, welcome. My name is Julie, and I'm a blogger over at Julie is Coco and Coco. Welcome. Today we are going to talk about knitting. So last week was my first week here doing a live video at Quirky Mama, and we did crochet, and we learned how to do a chain stitch and a slip knot and get our crochet started. So today we're going to flip over and do knitting and talk about how to cast on and how to start your knitting projects. I'm a knitter and a crocheter. I like to do both. Really, I'd like to do anything that's yarn related in general, or fiber related. Embroidery, cross stitch, fiber arts is kind of where my heart is. But today we're going to start knitting and talking about casting on. If you've never done knitting before, casting on is how you get your yarn onto the needles just to start your project. So, hi, welcome from California. Glad you're here. So, really what you need to start knitting is some yarn and a pair of knitting needles. If you go to the knitting store, so we'll start with talking kind of a little bit about yarn. We did this with the crochet video too, but if you missed last time, we'll go over that again. So when you go to the store and pick up your yarn, to start with I would recommend just going to a craft store. You're going to be practicing a lot, and so you probably don't want to spend a lot of money when you're first getting started. And you really just want to get used to how it feels and the stitches. You'll be ripping things out a lot. If you've been around a knitter or crocheter, we call that frogging, because you rip it, so like a frog. We're very funny. I like puns. So you go to the store and get some yarn. Especially the craft store yarn will come with a label that says what the weight of the yarn is. So like this one says it's a medium weight yarn. That's definitely what I recommend starting with. It's a nice thickness of yarn. It's not too thin. I also recommend starting with a really light colored yarn. It's going to be a lot easier to see your stitches and what you're doing than with a darker colored yarn. So a medium yarn is by weight. So it's so this says medium. It also has the number 4 on it. But something kind of in that middle category of thickness for the yarn to start. The yarn will also tell you what size knitting needles or crochet hook you need. Hi Isabella, hi Moni. So this, for crochet, it recommends a size J or 10. And then for knitting needles, there's a couple different measurements, but it says a size 9 or it's a 5.5 millimeter. And your needles will list both those. So grab some yarn, and then the knitting needles that it recommends. And there's a few different types of knitting needles. So these are kind of just the standard knitting needles. Straight, not too long. Obviously you need 2 of them. These are aluminum or metal. They also come, you can get wood needles, plastic. They come in a lot of different materials. The kind of aluminum metal ones are going to be the ones that you're probably going to find at the craft store. And so they'll say the size on the end here, but just a pair of straight knitting needles. They also have circular knitting needles, which we'll get to in the future. Bamboo, yeah, I like bamboo needles. And then they have, these are called double pointed needles. So where these straight needles just are pointed at one end, these have points on both ends. And really I'm just showing you these so that when you're walking around the store, you kind of see what the materials are and things that you can go to in the future. But for today, we really just want a standard pair of straight knitting needles and some yarn. So I'm going to show you a couple different kinds of ways to cast on your knitting. There are dozens and dozens of ways. So we'll look at a few today, and then if you have any questions, certainly let me know. Because I want you obviously to see my hands while we're doing this, I'm going to flip the camera around. So give me just a second. You get a nice shot of my ceiling while I turn this around. So I grabbed this white background, so hopefully you can see real easily what we're doing here. So sorry for all the camera flipping. Trying to make this easier for you guys to see. So here's the needles. And our yarn. So the first way we're going to do is called the wrap cast on. And this is a really simple cast on, but it's kind of hard to hold the tension. But we're going to start with that. So we want the yarn. So you want your ball of yarn, where all the yarn is called the working yarn. So you want that to your right, and you want the tail over on your left. So we're going to lay that out. And then we've got our knitting needle. And for this one, I've got my thumb up above. The phone. I don't know why. This is how I've done all the videos before. I'm sorry, guys. It looks right on my end. I don't know why it's... giving me issues today. Okay, is that any better? Somebody answer. Okay, maybe we'll see if that works better. Okay, sorry guys. So we've got our needle, and I've got the tail end over here, and the working yarn over here. All right, I'm gonna stick my thumb down, so up here, and I'm pointing it down. Then I'm just gonna loop the yarn around my thumb and place it on my needle. And then I have a stitch, okay? So thumb down, twist it, place it on the needle. And I'm kind of doing this exaggerated so it's not, then you kind of have to go back and test out, you know, pull that down. So let's do that again, okay? So let me hold it up a little higher. So I've got working yarn over here, thumb, twisting it, and placing it on the needle, and then kind of pulling it tight. So there, so this would be 3 stitches on our needle. So the 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's do that again. So hold this, thumb, twisting it, and placing it on the needle, and then pulling that. So when we talk about tension, we want the spacing between all these stitches to be familiar, or we want all the spacing to be similar, so that when we start adding in stitches, everything's nice and even. Okay, thumb, twist it around, and on my needle. So when you start a knitting pattern, it would tell you how many stitches you need to cast on. Here we've got 5. And you would just do that as many times as the pattern calls for how many stitches you need to cast on. So that's our first way. So that is the wrap cast on method. Like I said, there are a lot. So let's go to another one. And once we're done here, I will post the video on my YouTube channel, and last week's beginning crochet video is there too, so you can always go back and check those out if you need to rewatch it. Okay, so when we did the crochet last week, we did a slip knot, and we're going to do that again for this method of casting on. So for a slip knot, I've got my yarn and I've just kind of looped it over, and then I've got this backwards for me, sorry. Okay, here's my slip knot. I've got my yarn, I'm going to twist it over so my short end is laying on top, then I'm going to come up through the loop and pull the long end and make a slip knot. And I said last week it's called a slip knot because it slips, so you can resize the loop, and when you pull on the long end it tightens around the needle. So let's do that again. So here's my short end, long end, we'll do it flat again. There we go, short end's laying on top, and I want to pull the long end through the loop, like that. Okay, and I'm going to do one up closer, up in the air, so you can see what it looks like if you're just holding it and don't lay it flat. Here we go, I'm going to flip it. Got my hand through my loop and pulling that up. Okay, so then we have our slip knot. We can put it on our needle. And this is not a method, I'll be honest, that I use very often, so I might look a little awkward trying to do this. It's just not the method that I use. Okay, so I've got my slip knot on the needle that's in my left hand, and then I want to insert my right needle into the slip knot. So there you go. Both needles are through the knot, like that. Then I've got, untangle myself, the working yarn in my right hand, and I come, so see, I don't do this one very often, over the yarn, and this is very similar to knitting. Okay, pull this over here. So it's like I'm knitting, and then I place it back on that left needle. Okay, so let's do that again. Okay, I've got my stitch. It's right here on my left needle. I've got my right needle. I'm inserting it through the stitch in the back. So through, left needle's on top, right needle's behind. Kind of hold those in my left hand. I've got the long yarn. I'm going to move this tail so that it's not distracting. Okay, got my long yarn in my right hand. I want to wrap it over the back needle, the right needle. Then I'm going to guide it through. So it was over my needle, and I'm guiding it through, and then I'm placing it on the left stitch, or on the left needle. Okay, we're going to do that a couple more times. This is obviously a little more complicated than the first one. So, insert the needle, bring this around the long end of the yarn, make sure that short tail is just hanging there, long end around, bring your stitch through, and then place it on. Kind of going back, especially next time we do a knitting video, there are two methods to knitting. One, you hold the working yarn in your right hand, and it's called the English method. The other one, you hold it in your left hand, and that's called the Continental method. And that's the method I personally use to knit. It's actually not as common in the US, but I'm a self-taught knitter, and so that's just, I got a book, it showed both ways, I tried both, to me that was simpler. So this, if you knit with your right hand, this cast on will be very easy. If you decide to learn to knit holding the yarn in your left hand, which is what I do, this is a little more awkward because then I'm not used to having the working yarn in my right hand. So let's do that one more time. So through the stitch and wrap it around. And then kind of use the point of the needle. I'm looking at the camera, not my knitting needle, so I just lost it. Wrap it around and pull it through. And then place it back on the needle. So, thank you for sharing. Okay, so there is the stitches, and same thing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cast on. You would cast on as many as you need to that the pattern called for. Okay, so we can take that off and pull this out. Now the advantages of these first two methods of cast on that I've showed you is that you start from the tail and you work towards the working yarn. The next method I'm going to show you is called the long tail cast on, and it's actually the method I use, but it is a little bit tricky in that you have to kind of gauge how much yarn you think you're going to need for the cast on. That's why it's called a long tail. So you'd pull out the yarn. Because I've been knitting long enough, I can kind of gauge, I know for a hat how much yarn I'm going to need, or a scarf, but unfortunately it's just kind of experience based. But so this is the long tail, so you want a long tail. That's this end of the yarn. It's not what's connected to our ball. This one also starts with a slip knot. So, but I'm doing it in the middle. So I've got tail over here, working yarn over here, just like the other slip knot. I'm going to flip it, oh sorry guys, I'm going to flip it over, and pull my slip knot through. Okay, I'm going to insert my crochet hook, knitting needle. It's Friday, clearly. Alright, now, this is the one I like. It's definitely the most complicated of the three so far, probably. So, I've got, okay, knitting needle, tail, working yarn. The two pieces are about to get wrapped around my left hand. So, I've got, I'm just going to hold my hand like this. So my thumb goes like that on the working side of the yarn, and kind of just flip it around. Then the tail end, I'm grabbing with these 3 fingers, like that, and I'm making a triangle. From my needle down to my thumb and across, this is the working yarn. This is attached to the ball. This part of my triangle is the tail end over here. So let me do that again. Ready? So my thumb, and then around the fingers. And I'm holding the needle in my right hand. Alright, then it's kind of like a maze maybe. Taking the point of my needle, I want to go under the bottom. Hold on guys, this is what happens when I'm trying to look at the camera and not my hands. Okay, so actually then my finger goes like this, sorry. So there's my triangle, and then I'm going to put my finger through. Alright, down under this piece. I know it looks all kinds of complicated right now. Down under this piece is the first part. So triangle, got my finger, down under this piece, whoa, just under the bottom one. That's all I want. I just want to poke under the bottom one. Then I want to come over the top, well, okay, under the bottom, come to the top, wrap it, and I'm pulling that through that bottom piece. I'm letting go with my thumb, and I'm pulling it tight. Now, for all that complication, the reason I like this one is because my tension is always very consistent with the stitches that are on here, and the speed now with which I can do it. It is very complicated while you're starting, but I do find that a lot of knitters that have been doing this a while do use this method. But really it's just, that's the great thing, is that there's so many different methods to cast on that you have a choice and you can find what works best for you. So let's do this starting again. Okay, thumb from the working yarn, fingers from the tail, putting my finger across, going down, just pulling up this bottom piece, okay? Then I'm sort of coming from the top and pushing down this top piece, and I'm coming through the loop that's on my thumb. And then I'm letting go and pulling tight. So I'm going to do the whole movement from a couple different angles. So here's here, hold it like this. So if you're looking down at your hands, down this piece, pulling it through, releasing my thumb, and then using this. This way is, yeah, it looks totally weird. So if I'm holding it like this, under my thumb, around the top, pulling it through. And here we are again with our 5 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that you've got cast on. So that is 3 ways to start knitting, to start casting on. I said there are probably at least 30 different ways to cast on. If you came in late, make sure to go back to the start of the video. I started with probably the simplest method and then moved out from there. But those are 3 ways to cast on. I'm going to flip this to you for a minute. Hi. Like I said, there's a couple different methods to knitting. Knit English method, where you hold the yarn in your I'm trying to pull my yarn closer to me. I'm leaning over here. So you can hold the yarn either in your left or right hand. Like I said, I knit continental method, which means that I hold the yarn running through the fingers of my left hand, but I will try to demonstrate both ways to do that. If you, like I said, if you missed some of the beginning, go back. I did 3 different ways to cast on. If none of those work for you, send me an email, let me know. Head over to my website. It's julieiscocoandcoco.com, and I'll link down below too in the comments. You can also head over and check out the beginning crochet video that we did last time with learning the chain stitch. But really, if none of those work for you, let me know and we can do another video, and I'll pull out 3 more ways to cast on, just to give you a nice variety so that you can find something that really works for you. Knitting is, so in crochet there's a whole bunch of different stitches. There's the chain stitch, which we did. There's single crochet, double crochet, treble crochet. There's a kind of a more variety of stitches. In knitting, there's really just casting on, there's knit stitches, and there's purl stitches. And casting on is kind of where the most variety comes from. And we'll just keep building every week, and we'll start some projects. It's getting colder, and so we want everybody to make some scarves and hats and things so you can keep yourself warm. But really, head over to julieiscocoandcoco.com, send me an email, check out the YouTube channel, I'll have the video up there, and as well as the crochet video, and let me know what your yarn questions are, and I'll make sure I answer them in future videos. So thanks for hanging out with me this morning and for playing with some yarn, and I'll be back with some more stuff for you. Have a great day. Bye.